Good afternoon. Welcome to the National Press Club. My name is Sonia Hilgren. I am president of the National Press Club and editor of Farm Journal. I'd like to welcome Press Club members in the audience today, as well as your guests, those of you watching on C-SPAN, listening on National Public Radio, or on the Internet Global Computer Network. Before introducing our head table, I would like to remind our members of some upcoming speakers. On Tuesday, June 11th, Jim Lehrer of PBS's NewsHour with Jim Lehrer and Tom Brokaw, anchor of NBC Nightly News, will talk about their joint coverage of the upcoming political conventions. On Friday, June 14th, Secretary of the Air Force, Sheila Widnall, will present a speech entitled "The United States Air Force in the 21st Century, Shaping Defense for a New World." And on Tuesday, June 18th, Michael Jordan, chairman of the Westinghouse CBS Group, will talk about We'd like to have that Michael Jordan come here to talk as well. But anyway, that Michael Jordan is going to talk about the restructuring of Westinghouse and how the network fits into the company's plans. Transcripts and audio and video tapes of Press Club luncheons are available by calling 1-800-NPC-2334. If you have questions for our speaker, please write them on the cards provided at your tables and pass them up to me. I will ask as many as time permits. I'd now like to introduce our head table guests and ask them to stand briefly when their names are called. From your right, Brock Meeks, Chief Washington Correspondent for Wired and Hot Wired. Don Carney, Congressional Quarterly. Rory O'Connor, San Jose Mercury News. Lou Pearlman, Executive Editor, Knowledge Inc. Newsletter. Paul Marion, Washington Bureau Chief, Crane Communications. Jennifer Omani, Corporate Public Relations Manager, Netscape Communications Corporation. Reggie Stewart, Assistant News Editor, Knight Ridder Newspapers. Peter Harder, Public Policy Counsel, Netscape Communications Corporation. Vanita Anand, Pensions and Investments Magazine and member of the Press Club Speakers Committee who arranged today's luncheon. William Roger, Washington Bureau Chief of Interactive Week. Timothy Malloy, Editor, The Internet Newsroom. And Stephanie Stahl, Senior Writer, Information Week. There's one thing to keep in mind about our speaker today. He is not your typical Silicon Valley chieftain. For one thing, he's over 50. For another, his socks usually match. This guy didn't even start the company. And he's got charisma, usually a scarce commodity in the country's computer hothouse. In fact, Jim Barksdale has so much charisma that Fortune magazine recently named him one of the most charismatic leaders of America. So much so that Jim Clark, Netscape co-founder, offered the job of chief executive the same day they met. With Barksdale, the president of doing stuff, as he calls himself, the company stormed out of the opening gate when it became public on August 9th last year. Its shares skyrocketed that day to $75 from the opening price of $28. By nightfall, the company was worth more than $2 billion. Even those who didn't know the difference between a megabyte and an overbyte showed up at the company's Mountain View, California office wanting a piece of the N. At the broker firm Charles Schwab, the 800 number got a new wording. Press 1 if you're calling about Netscape. By Thanksgiving, the stock broke the $100 barrier and was headed for the lunar orbit at $174 a share by December. Not bad for a company that hadn't even shown a dime of profit. Today, the combustible little internet software company's site on the information highway gets more than 19 million hits a day. and the Washington Post proclaimed that the company may one day pose a threat to Microsoft. Thanks to Netscape, millions of travelers on the information highway know how to get around. But before our speaker took charge last year in January, Netscape was just another typical Silicon Valley startup, chaotic. Most of its 100 or so cyberspace wonderkins were so new at the game, they were panicking about delivery deadlines, and the company looked like it might run out of cash. Jim Barksdale brought a been there, done that type of much-needed vision to the company. He was used to running bigger outfits, like McCaw Cellular and AT&T's wireless service operations. Before that, he was the #2 guy at Federal Express, which he grew 8-fold in the dozen years he was there. His message to Netscape employees was the company was like a rocket. If it failed to reach top speed, it would crash to earth. Our speaker didn't graduate from any Ivy League business school. He doesn't have an MBA. His degree is from the University of Mississippi. And under him, Netscape could become the fastest growing software company in history. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the National Press Club the President and CEO of Netscape, Jim Barksdale.
That was a terrific introduction. Over 50. It is a pleasure to be here to talk about the Internet. I want to talk a little bit about Internets, intranets, and I'll help define those. I realize that we have a very diverse group here, and we have people who are obviously steeped in the technology, and some others who earlier in the reception who are maybe just a shareholder in our company or have no idea what we do. So I'll try to blend the two together and talk a little bit about the future. But before I do, what time I have to shut up, given this?
About 1:30.
Okay. All right. And then we take questions, right? Well, you know, we're pleased. We are a little bitty company and invited to speak before the National Press Club. That's quite an honor for a company that's only had a product for about 16 months, only been in business for 1 year, 2 years and 1 month. But not many companies would have that exposure, so something must be going on here. How much of it we're responsible for versus how much was going to happen anyway, I don't know. We'd like to take credit we can take, but fact is, there's an awful lot happening now. I think the Internet has actually gotten to be so topical primarily because it was the big news story after the O.J. Simpson trial ended, and we needed something to talk about, but we're certainly flattered. It's been great for our business, great for our customers, and great for our employees. Let's talk for a little bit about why this phenomenon has happened, or at least a perspective on why it's happened, and then where we think it's from here, and some of the changes that you might look for depending on your interest in this subject. Before I do that, I'd like to see how many of you use the Netscape Navigator or have used it. Okay, so we won't spend a lot of time describing the product. That's wonderful. And let me ask you this. How many of you have visited the FedEx homepage to track packages, your packages on? That's good. We'll come back to that in a minute. I'm not plugging FedEx, but that's a point I want to make later. How do we know something's going on? Well, a couple of numbers. It was mentioned we're doing over 19 million hits per day. I don't know when that was written. Today we're doing over 75 million hits per day. A year ago we were doing less than 10 million. This is a phenomenon. Now I don't want you to think that 75 million hits a day is 75 unique individuals. I'm sure most of you know that, but it's still an indication of interest and growth. We now have over 40 million copies of the Netscape Navigator distributed worldwide, primarily through the electronic medium of the Internet. About how that happens and why that allows you to grow at the rate we've grown. It was also mentioned we might be the fastest startup. We are the fastest software startup company in history. Our first year revenue producing over 80 million, which was the fastest growing software company ever. First year growth, going to work hard for the second year. So something must be going on there. We'd like to take credit for all of it, but I think there is a definite sea change in the way we communicate. Why is that happening? Why are people interested in this? In the 70s, there were somewhere, depending on where you were in the 70s, a few tens to a few 100,000 users of the internet, mostly in the university or military and research environment as it began to be deployed, primarily in the United States and then eventually overseas. In the 80s, there were a few million. In the 90s, there are tens of millions. The next millennium, the next decade, depending on how you look at it, maybe hundreds of millions. One order of magnitude per decade, that's pretty good growth for any business. 100 million people connected through the internet would seem to me such a magic thing, and we may see it within the next couple of 3 years. Unbelievable. Why is this happening? Well, we tell people, or I believe, having lived through the building of other networks like the FedEx network, which is a delivery system to be sure, but it has the same issues, problems, opportunities, and characteristics of any network, be it telecommunications or a delivery system. And electronic networks, first of all, you have to have ubiquity. You have to believe that the person at the other end will be there, right? Or that there's something at the other end of the line. I mean, the problem of the first telephone salesman. This person was the greatest salesman in history. Who was the first customer going to talk to? Right? Ubiquity. The facsimile machine didn't catch on until everybody thought everybody else had one, right? There was a period where you could actually open a business without having a fax machine. Now you can't even have a house without having a fax machine. Yet the G3 fax machine, the one we all use, the standardized fax machine, only came into being a little more than a dozen years ago. 1981, 1982 is when it began being introduced, and that's when the thing took off. That shows you how fast networks grow once people believe, I got to be on the network or I'm going to be left out. And that is called Metcalfe's Law, after a fellow named Bob Metcalfe, who invented the Ethernet technologies, was founder of 3Com Corporation. Bob's point is, and it's well taken, is the same phenomenon we saw at FedEx. You grow a business based on the number of endpoints, but not additive. Rather, you grow it at the exponential growth rate of the endpoints, because every endpoint can now be connected to every other one. So the value of a 10-point network, right, would be roughly 100, not 10. And so you grow these networks because now that you add one more endpoint, that's that many more things people to do. So they grow at a much more powerful rate than additive types of businesses that are unconnected. The old story, you can't, you shouldn't size a bridge by counting the swimmers. The network draws the traffic. The network is the traffic. Highways create traffic. Highways create traveling. Telecommunications networks create communications. And that's why they take off in this sort of a fast ramp in the one we're participating in, as well as everybody else who's in this industry enjoying this marvelous growth. Ubiquity. The second is economy. I've got to be able to afford it. The telecommunications industry, of course, probably the most productive industry of the century, bringing down the cost of telecom dramatically. 1928, it cost you about $100 to make a 3-minute phone call East Coast to West Coast of the United States. Today it's, according to Candace Bergman, a dime a minute. So a 3-minute call would be 30 cents. Almost a 1,000-fold increase. This is phenomenal, and we participate. Communication's gotten to be very cheap. Ubiquity, economy, and the third part, and the first two parts Netscape had nothing to do with. The third part we had something to do with. Our little team of core engineers that came out of the University of Illinois National Center for Supercomputing Applications had developed a little product called the Mosaic browser. And what it did was it made the internet, which had been in existence by that time almost 30 years, nobody knew about it outside of academia and the really serious heat seekers of the world. The Mosaic browser made it where mere mortals could use it. And so the third leg of the stool of network power is utility. It's got to be useful and it's got to be usable. Is it usable? You know, is it something I can do something with? Do I care about this? Well, you make that choice. Is it usable? Well, we think it is. Nobody's been. I took a formal training course on the Netscape Navigator. Isn't that amazing? About like the telephone, right? That's the point. You know, sort of intuitive. I see, I point, I click, I go, I learn. I can browse, I can cruise. And it's very interesting. The question is, why does anybody care about all this? Well, because, in our opinion, and we're obviously biased, all businesses, all institutions, all governments, all people who care about or communicate with each other or as part of their business or use communication or depend upon communication or their people communicate with each other, they will be changed by what's going on with this phenomenon. Now, if none of those things apply to you, then you shouldn't care about what's going on here. Like the fellow said, there are three kinds of people: those that see something going on, take advantage of it; those that see something going on, can't figure out how to take advantage of it; and those wonderfully happy people who haven't got a clue anything's going on. Well, I'll put you all in the first or second category. The internet changes everything. It disintermediates intermediaries. It forms new ways of communicating, new ways of collaborating, new ways of navigating, new ways of moving applications, new ways of seeing, learning, getting involved, getting uninvolved. That's why it has occupied the space it has, I think. Also, it's because it's both a consumer product and a business product. Consumer products always get more interest than business products in the normal conventional press. Example, a consumer product like an online service company like AOL right down the road here, wonderful company. People read about AOL all the time. The market for online financial services, which are another type of proprietary but mostly for business, is about a $12 billion industry in the United States. The entire online service industry is like $2.5 billion. Have you ever read an article about the online financial services industry? No. It's kind of boring. It's business only. That's intranet. That's where we put our growth in. 80% of our revenue comes from intranet buyers for the use within companies or between companies or for company to company or company to vendor or vendor to customer kind of relations. Intranets. We'll come to that. First, let's one more minute on the internet. For those who don't know, and since this is also on radio, obviously we don't know who's out there. 50 million users today, we think. Over 1 million developers. You know, people get confused. They say, well, there's so many developers, a few tens, a few thousands. No. Anybody who's composed a web page is now a developer. I used to be a consumer. Now I'm a creator. We all have this innate desire to, and particularly in this room, publish, right? This allows people who for years have kind of been taking it, now they can push it back out. Millions of people now creating web pages. Some of them wonderful, some of them questionable. But they're all out there having fun. The intranet, however, is the principal portion of our concern today, and it's where most of the growth is in our business and businesses like ours. It creates new killer applications, new tool sets for people to use within businesses. It also creates a new balance of power. Because it's built on open standards, intranets can be purchased without the fear that tomorrow they will be obsolete and I have to go to another vendor. You see, I build on a very thin ice called worldwide standards, as do everybody else in my business. You can kick me out over a weekend and put one of my competitors' products in. That's bad for me, but that's great for the systems software buyer within a business. They get freedom. They were the ones pushing this thing. I used to be a buyer of software. I probably have bought more software than any CEO of a software company in America. I used to buy this stuff for a living. I know what it's like to lose sleep over the fact you've just put up 10,000 more lines of code on somebody, no matter how wonderful the vendor may be. The Aardvark 6, all right? only runs this kind of code. Heaven help me if I don't like aardvark tomorrow, their prices get too high. With this kind of software, people are able to bring up applications much more quickly for much less money and have the open standards freedom to move from one vendor to another. That is a powerful sales argument, a powerful sales argument. And that's what fueled the growth of our little company. They were calling us, buying this stuff by the boatload, huge installations. Companies like Hewlett-Packard deploying 100,000 seats of the Netscape Navigator so they could communicate across the companies. Companies like Lockheed Martin buying tens of thousands of copies just so they could get their HR manuals to everybody in a way that we want to read HR. See, I point, I click. I want to benefit. What's this? I don't want that book. Book's out of date anyway. Right? Sits there, takes up shelf space, kills trees. Cumbersome, expensive. I mean, this may sound like simple stuff, but folks, I'm a big believer the world is made of simple stuff. And the simpler, the easier it is to sell it, and the easier it is to buy it. You see people bringing up whole application sets for marketing, just so I can distribute marketing information, the latest pricing, so we're all singing out of the same hymnal. Or my sales force around the world now can distribute the latest in the graphics I want them to show in their next slideshow to customers. As of last night, everybody's singing out of the same hymnal. Marvelous for communication, marvelous for collaboration. I work within work groups, within teams. We work together as a team, we communicate as a team. That's collaborative computing. Our products do that within businesses in a group of server products, which are what people are now buying to deploy these kind of products within businesses, client server products. The question would be, why did this happen at this rate? And it's the same as any networks. Ubiquitous. Most businesses today, certainly not all, but in particular in the United States, have a vast retinue now of PCs on desktops. They're not all necessarily the very latest hotshot PCs, but most businesses have a vast deployment of PCs out there, so that now for the first time it's practical to say, gee, I want to communicate with all of them. Same time, same software. Problem was before, some of them were Macs, Macintoshes, some of them were Wintel platforms, Windows and Intel, some were Windows 3.1, some were Windows 95, some were Unix platform, Unix this, Unix that. So it was impractical to deploy seamlessly across all of these until you used a true internet-based standard product, a TCP/IP or internet standard-based product. And that has solved this problem for many, many businesses. And when I say businesses, that obviously also includes institutions and enterprises of any type. It could be a government agency or a ministry, or just any affinity group. Could be a church group, could be a university. So the revolution in intranets has been away from proprietary and towards open standards. And it is happening at an extremely rapid rate. By the way, one point there, since I'm in Washington, I can't resist the temptation to do a little, plus since Peter Harder, who handles these governmental affairs, there's currently a bill that we'd like everybody here to be supportive of in the United States Senate that basically says that the United States government should not be in the business of restricting the amount of cryptography that is exportable from the United States in software products. That's a great burden to companies like mine, number one, so it penalizes U.S. software companies and hardware companies. And two, it won't work. There are people, look on the web, look under Sue or on the United, there are all kinds of encryption schemes now coming up on the web that plug right into my Navigator. So if you're in South Africa, for instance, you can get full 128-bit encryption for those who are into it. NTT announced a 1,024-bit encryption scheme. So it's not like you can keep this smoke in the bottle, folks, all right? I just suggest we let them go work on something else. And I don't mean to be critical. I really don't. I recognize I really do. I recognize their problems. But this is not the solution to their problems. And it's a big burden on companies like mine, which there are a lot of. What do people do in a business? Very quickly, and then we'll wrap up. They share information with themselves, with their coworkers, with people around the company, with people outside the company. Information sharing has been going on in a number of ways and technologies for years. The telephone, certainly, was a great one. The letter, snail mail, intra-office mail. Remember all those little things you used to have with the little pieces of string at the top that was the envelope, inter-office envelopes? Y'all still have those, apparently. None exist at Netscape. They're outlawed. Navigation. I can't find it. You know, the first question everybody has in business is, what's going on? Right? The day you're hired, maybe the day you're fired. I don't know, but you always ask them, what's going on around here? Okay? That's communication. Here's what's going on. This is our plan. Then the next question that's always asked is, how do I find things? So the next thing people do in business is navigation. That's the second major component of intranets. You know, all the things about a customer, not just the things in the customer file. How about the fact that the customers called over here to this unit, sent a letter to that unit, it's on the database back here and the billing records over there, you know, and we lost his shipment over here. I'd like to know everything about the customer when I interface with the customer. That's very hard to do in businesses. That's called navigation. This kind of software provides that. Therefore, it's very attractive. The next is communication, obviously, which answers the question of, how do I fit in? It's this whole thing of collaboration. What's going on? What's the information about it? Then how do I fit in? The great question you want all employees to ask sooner or later. What can I do to help? When they ask that, you know you got them. Most businesses go through a lifetime trying to get them to ask that. That's when you get the discretionary power of the employee. That's what employee empowerment means. That means very flat levels of management, not big hierarchies, you know, patterned after the Army or the church or whatever. Nice and flat and thin. Software, nice collaboration, communications, cheap. Bring it up quick, get on to the next subject. Don't spend years developing these things. And the last is applications, which is how can I move the applications I need to do my job across the company cheaply, which answers the ultimate business question, how do I save money? Is this economical? And I submit to you it's enormously beneficial. Company after company, big railroad company not too far from here, had been working on this legacy system, freight tracking system to interface with their customer for years. Couldn't get it done on a proprietary thing. Hired a little developer company out of Chicago. They came in, used our software, put the whole thing online, all the customers hooked up within a matter of about 2 months at almost no cost, because it solves the problem of communication, navigation, collaboration in one fell swoop. This benefits, obviously, customers. It benefits employees, makes them more productive. It benefits businesses. And that's why businesses are doing it. So you have this marvelous play. I use it at home. I use it at work. I use it at work. I use it at home. I use it in my business. I use it for my own entertainment. It's all the same software. It's amazing. Just like another thing we communicate with, the telephone. I dial it at the office just like I dial it at home. It works the same way. You know, the end without cord stuck in it goes by my mouth. The end without the cord stuck in it goes by my ear. Same little keypad. It's amazing. Is it a consumer device? Is it a business device? I don't know. But just like that great communications point-to-point device, we see the same thing happen with the internet. It grows up initially in business. For 100 years, the telephone was a business tool. Then it spreads out in the consumer market. The great thing about this, it's spreading in both at the same time. Eventually getting it to the ultimate point where you have a collaboration communication between people or between businesses, so that we can have the same sort of interface and communication we're having right here in this room, just as active, just as lively, just as visible, but we could be on different continents and in different centuries. That's what all of this digitization is moving towards, the ultimate multimedia convergence. Ever since the development of the movable type printing press, it's all been going that way. Printing presses were an accommodation because I could print cheaply and had to distribute broadly. Publishing came in because that was a broadcast model. Television, radio. It's a broadcast model because it was not economical to do television point to point. And you had all the other issues of content and so forth. But ultimately, human beings want the flexibility of communicating point to point, from me to you, or from me to many, or from me to NBC, or NBC to me. I mean, that's what we want. So everything else is an accommodation. We're moving inexorably to that point in the ultimate future. Now, whether it's going to take us 10 years or 100 years or 1,000 years, I don't know. But it certainly seems to provide great opportunities for companies and people and creators and developers and others to move along that inexorable trail towards this ultimate in human interactivity. And with that, I think my time is up. I appreciate very much, and we'll now do some questions.
If the internet enables people to bypass intermediaries, what does it do to the news media? If books are out of date, what about newspapers and magazines?
I didn't say books were out of date. When did I say that? I said it, no, I didn't say they were out of date. I said the HR manual was out of date. It's not a book. Oh, my goodness. The publishing, look, movies are better than ever. Remember the demise of movies when television came along, and then the demise of television when the VCR came along. They're all thriving industries. All of these things work together. I was talking to some people this morning who are in the publishing business about what you have to find are the new opportunities and new avenues. In other words, what is it this tool allows you to do that the previous ones didn't? It's the old story of when TV came along. They started out first reading radio scripts. This was not exciting television, folks. All right? It wasn't until Milton Berle and others brought vaudeville back in as a visible medium and changed the medium to match the product. Well, same thing here. I think we were talking this morning about how you don't like to read a newspaper column. You know, we only do that as an accommodation. God did not say you have to read from top to bottom of the column. You get halfway down, you see a word or phrase. I want to know more. No, you can't do that. Got to keep going to the bottom, right? With the internet, I find that if it's a hyperlink, I can go learn something else about that subject. It's something that's the way we like to learn and think. That's why you use this product, I presume, in a large way. Publishers have to be coming into that mold on this medium, but there's certainly going to be many, many, many years of prosperity, I think, for the normal publishing industry. One doesn't replace the other. I don't believe. I think people have an insatiable desire to communicate and to learn.
The highest percentage of our questions today deal with your relationship with Microsoft. Some people have said Netscape is the industry's Microsoft killer. Others say Bill Gates will crush you. You have 80% of the browser business. On the other hand, some people say Microsoft's Internet Explorer has won. What is it?
Well, let's see. We certainly have good competitors. We think the world of Microsoft as a company and as a provider of good software, but it goes back to the story I was making earlier. Microsoft has built a great business off of very proprietary software. People who are buying software today for communication don't necessarily want to go back into that cave. And therefore, they want freedom of choice. Our products are as good, we think better, and they're considerably cheaper when they compete against products like Back Office and others. People say, well, Microsoft gives away the Explorer, I think your point was. Yeah, well, that's not the point. In a business, Back Office is charged by the seat. They can give away 10 Explorers. That has nothing or little to do with the price of the client-server suite. And that is a very expensive proposition. It's one of the reasons they're so interested in being very competitive with us. They don't want us taking that revenue. So what I look at it is, look, we're a little company. We're on our way to about $225, $250 million a year based on our last reported quarter at least. And Microsoft's a $10 billion company, I presume, going on the way to $20 billion within the next 3 or 4 years. Look, they can have their 20. I'll take $2 billion. They don't have to get to $22 billion to be successful. You know, That's the great thing about competition. In all seriousness, I've always been in very competitive businesses. I remember the day when UPS got in the overnight business and they were going to put FedEx out of business. Well, they're still around. These things are always presented as sort of win-lose battles, and they aren't. They're out there hyping the industry. I get some business from that. I'm out there hyping the business industry. They're getting some business from that. The churn, the interaction, the fact that we all have sleepless nights worrying about the other guy's latest features and products, that inures to the ultimate benefit of the consumer. As long as the consumer is taken care of, then we'll fight it out. We do think we have better products, much better pricing for the enterprise. We have more people working on this particular segment of products than they do or anybody else on the planet. We have the people who actually developed it. Most of these products came from our labs and our people. But it's a foot race. I don't doubt that. I think over the long haul they will not crush us, or whatever the word was. And if they did, it would be a shame, because it would mean that nobody could ever start a software company again and try to compete against that sort of a marketing presence. And that would be truly a shame.
America Online and CompuServe have relationships both with Microsoft and Netscape. Is that compatible?
Sure. We believe that they can distribute or deliver our products over their networks. They're going to deliver Microsoft's, of course. And we would like for the consumer, the end user, to choose. We think if it's a fair choice, we will win our share of the business. We don't have aspirations to have all of the business. We want to be competitive. We build a good product. We think the consumer will choose our product. What really happens is a lot of people choose both. And they play with one, they play with the other, and then they decide. And then later on, they'll go back to the other one. That's because they're open, standard software. And so, as a result, it's good for our business, good for their business. We don't see that as being a particular problem. Would we have preferred that they only distribute our products and not theirs? Sure, but the conditions of that are such that we wouldn't find that acceptable. And that's why they're both in a horse race. I mean, but we went into it knowingly, put it that way.
Why is it taking so long for America Online to make Netscape accessible? What, if any, is the advantage for a home user to subscribe to America Online as opposed to just having Netscape?
First of all, on America Online, you can now pull down the Netscape Navigator. But they have well, that's the first part of the question. The second one was, what's the advantage of doing one versus the other? Or using AOL or using Netscape on the internet? I think it depends on what you see your use has been. AOL is a marvelous provider of proprietary content and new things, like the Motley Fool and issues like that are of interest to people. They've spent money on that. And that's fine and good. They're very good at delivering connectivity to their network and the internet eventually, and that's good. We need those kind of people. If you want to just be out on the net and have a very low fixed price per month, you choose the other alternative. We've certainly seen people who've switched off of one and onto the other, but we are not, we're not certainly actively trying to lure customers of AOL away. We think that's a very viable alternative, and in the long run will spread the use of products like ours much more than if they didn't exist and if they weren't as good and big and broad as they are.
With CompuServe's recent announcement, all the major online services except AOL have announced migration to the World Wide Web. Do you think AOL eventually will have to follow this pattern also?
Yes.
Have you ever met privately with Bill Gates? What did you talk about? Did you like him?
I've never met privately with Bill Gates. I've met him in public, and seems to be a very likable fellow.
What do you use the web for? What are your favorite sites and why?
I'm obviously a different kind of user, but I use it every day in a variety of ways. One, we use the web for intra-communications at Netscape. That's how we run the business, so I use it all day long. We use it for email. We use it for threaded news groups. But if you mean the outside web, outside the company, I use it for finding things, for research, for remote email. I send email through the web that way and through the Navigator, which has an embedded email system in it. I also have a marvelous thing called Pointcast. Have any of y'all seen Pointcast? It's the new screensaver that's always pulling down traffic based on my filters. I can see what I'm interested in, the ball clubs I'm interested in, and not the rest of them. The stocks and values on the markets, the weather in cities I'm interested in. They display the map, and it's all just scrolling instead of me looking, you know, at toasters all day. And it's a marvelous, it's a marvelous thing. So that's a new way of using it. I mean, it's sort of the. They found that people actually stare at their screensavers, not actually look at them, about 2 hours a day. You know, while you're on the phone or something, you're kind of looking at. Well, now you got something to look at, and it's interesting. One other favorite site, by the way, is Travelocity from AMR Group that allows you to do bookings of hotels and rentals cars and airline reservations online, and it's particularly something my wife loves, and so I'm a big fan of it.
What are your thoughts about politics on the web? Have you visited Politics Now and Politics USA?
It seems to me I've hit Politics Now and something we were looking at. My view of politics on the web, I'm probably not as political an animal as some, so I don't tend to look at it from that point of view other than just general political news.
Did IBM's Lou Gerstner blow it by paying $35 billion for Lotus?
He would have if he'd spent $35 billion. He actually spent $3.5 billion. Sorry. And so I think it's still, this is the one-year anniversary of that. I think I wouldn't use the term blow it. I think it's questionable how they build on that product. I think that proprietary groupware products are a thing of the past, and that's why people are buying our products. But there's certainly many things they could do with that marvelous brand, Notes, and their great throwaway at IBM to do some neat things together. We'll see.
Do you think that the internet access provider business will tend to congregate around places such as AT&T, or will decentralized, specialized internet access providers maintain an important share of the market?
A lot of discussion about that, obviously. I think eventually the advantage goes to the underlying carrier, like the AT&T or the Bell operating companies, because they are the basic, you know, lowest common denominator, the lowest cost point, and so everybody else rides on top of them. But I do think that the internet service providers are showing a great deal of renewed flexibility in figuring out new services that the big carriers can't perform, and there's always a market for boutiques, even in a world of supermarkets and department stores and malls. And I think that those that are aggressive and clever and give exemplary customer service can build a very nice business for themselves. Those that don't give exemplary customer service, I think, will find it difficult.
Where would Netscape be today if you or someone with your leadership and organizational skills had not been hired?
They're probably about twice as big. I don't know. It is an unusual thing, of course, that a startup company would bring in a person that's had experience, and it was an unusual thing for me. I thought I'd have fun, and I've never had more fun in my life. But it was needing of some adult supervision when I got there.
What is Mark Andreessen working on?
Mark Andreessen, who is the young man who was head of the group at Illinois, who was the co-founder of our company and recently on the cover of Time magazine, barefooted. I said, Mark, you're the only guy on the cover of Time barefoot? Nope, Mahatma Gandhi had been. So now I have to call Mark the Mahatma. No. He's working on our technology strategy. He is the principal strategy person. He has no people working for him, which gives him some great, but we put a neat group around him of Eric Hahn, who ran Collabra, the company we bought over there, Martin Hilleby, who came from a similar job at Apple, a couple other very, very clever people who are sort of laying out the navigational charts for our company, and is doing a marvelous job. One of the great things about Mark most people don't know, in addition to just being laser bright, particularly on this subject, he's one of the best communicators and writers I've ever seen in my business career. He can express himself so beautifully with the written word, and with electronic mail and collaborative groups, it's even more powerful because every night you get a nice new update from Mark on what he's thinking about.
How do you recruit talent for a business that is fast changing? What kind of talent do you seek, and how important are academic credentials?
We seek talent that's looking for fast-changing things, that aren't intimidated by it, but we are getting a different sort of a mix of people coming to us who are, in the early days of a business like this, you get people who are very risk-oriented, almost too much so, in fact. You know, and when you get to some level of maturity, you find people risk-averse. The difficulty with Netscape is we went from sort of childhood to adulthood without adolescence. We were never permitted the mistakes that you can make as a teenager and be forgiven for. And so now people come to us looking as though we're some Hewlett-Packard or somebody, some full-grown company. You know, we're still in short pants, but we just happen to be adult size, like Andreessen. It's wonderful is the full answer, but it certainly provides us challenges because of a lot of things. But all our employees have equity in the company or options on equity in the company, regardless of what they do. So that's one of the ways you attract them. We're looking for people who are outstanding, particularly in the development side, who are outstanding computer science people or have terrific records. We have an active college program. We're very pleased. We hired 50 young people directly out of master's, PhDs, and undergraduate programs from the 5 or 6 best computer science courses in the United States. And I think out of 50-something offers, we got 50 acceptances. We brought in another 50 interns from the same schools, including some of these vaunted Princeton code crackers. We look for those kind of people, clever, smart people. Academic levels, though, we have a lot of people, surprisingly, who didn't go to college. And if you talk to some of them, they say, I didn't want to go to college, but it slowed me down. And some of them, the fellow who developed our virtual reality, or our 3D stuff, he didn't go to college. He went straight to work for IBM or something because he was into coding. And so you see some of that. I don't know if they're prodigies or not, but it doesn't seem to have hurt them. The great thing, though, about computer science today is people are teaching it who themselves were taught by people who were teaching it. When I came into the world of IBM 100 years ago, you know, you kind of learn through on-the-job training. Here they come with a lot more history of the industry and the products, and they hit the ground running, and it's really quite refreshing to see what our schools are turning out.
How long will you be able to tell stockholders that a paltry $4.7 million quarterly profit on $55 million in revenue is too much? What is a rational price-earnings ratio for Netscape stock?
I think a $4 million profit on $55 million for a company that's 6 quarters into its product lineup, pretty good. 5 quarters at the time. We have told our investors, we've told the people who follow us that if we make a profit, it's an accident. We want to take every dollar revenue we got and put it back into these young people we're hiring, the products we're building. People want Netscape to grow. They're not looking at it as a dividend company. Obviously, we have to start producing earnings. We've surprised people. People said, how could a company that gives away its browser get any revenue? And we were first-year revenue leader of any software company. Then they said, well, they don't make money. Well, we were cash flow positive. We just, found other things to invest in. But now we actually have a profit. We recognize as a public company we need to continue to show improvements, and we think as a mature software company we will probably show the kind of margins that mature software companies show. But our goal is to get there a little more slowly. Since we're ramping like this, we run the business very simple. We look at this quarter's forecast. If it's X amount of dollars, we hire to hit that number. We can't look out a year and tell you exactly what the revenue is going to be, so you can't build a one-year budget. But you can sure work on the quarterly basis. And what we don't want to do is have our lack of imagination slow down the business. The business runs at the rate of the market growth. We want to at least grow as faster than the market, and not a person on this planet or in this room can tell me what that rate is. So we just want to keep the pedal to the metal, and then we watch it on a 90-day basis, and we'll temper expenses that way. And then earnings per share multiple, we don't comment about the EPS or the future revenues or prospective issues like that. We think that people are obviously pricing forward the internet, and they use our stock and others to do that with and trying to catch the next wave. When you factor that in, it's impossible to talk about EPS models. The EPS models weren't built for companies like this because they don't fit the growth curve for companies like this. We're growing at year over year, first quarter over first quarter, about 1,000%. So if you use a standard models, that'd be a 1,000 EPS. We're not there yet, so.
The newest hot software out of the University of Illinois is Habanveros. It allows real-time collaboration on the web among people located anywhere. Is there a big market behind this? Is Netscape working on a similar product, or will you license this product?
Netscape has a product like this called Sweet Spot. That's what I was talking about for intranets for collaborative computing. As far as the University of Illinois product, we wish them well. We don't have a strong opinion about it. We think that for them to make it a success, they do need to find a commercial enterprise that will promote it for them. It is a project that was actually, it's my understanding at least, under development prior to when the Mosaic product was begun, so it's been around for a while. The idea is certainly sound. How good the product is, I don't know, we haven't looked at it, but we think we have a good competitive product for it.
You quoted Metcalfe's law. Metcalfe also says the internet is in immediate danger of collapse and is already tottering. Do you agree? What can be done?
I was on Bob Metcalfe's board for 7 years. There's some things I agree with Bob on and some things I don't agree with Bob on. I'm happy to give him credit for his law. I think he's just wrong as rain about the internet collapsing, because the internet lives in the most perfect, or one of the most perfect balances of supply and demand. I can assure you, as demand grows, the people out there who sell you your connections will be happy to sell you more connections. In addition to which, the technology is racing ahead with ATM and fiber optics at such a rate that it compensates for that. In addition, there are new software models that allow you to download things at night, even though you're going to look at them in the day, products like Milk Truck and others, so that you give the perception of much more speed, even though the searching is done asynchronously or at some other time of day. So, no, I think Bob's all wet on that one, but I sure like him a lot. He's a friend of mine, but then I disagree with a lot of my friends about some things.
How can Netscape support the congressionally mandated distance learning initiatives? Will this reach into elementary schools, junior and senior high schools, and replace book learning?
I don't think it'll ever replace book learning. I think that's one of the misconceptions, but we do participate. We give our browsers away, our Navigator client product away free to education and have from day one. So there are probably, I don't know, several million copies out there in the schools of America that are free from our company. I would therefore say we've made as big a contribution as just about anybody. Obviously, we have a low cost per unit product, so it's easier to do. We are personally very committed to pushing forward on education initiative. We have a vertical marketing group set up, even though we get no revenue from it, to push this. And I personally contributed personal money to these efforts, and have had conversations with others here in Washington about what we could do to push this forward. I think that education is the highest and best use for products like this. The question is, how do you do it practically? We've all seen noble experiments in education fail because, you know, implementation was a far different problem than just thinking up the idea. So there are a lot of thoughts about that. We've pushed ahead in a lot of areas and excited about it. And we're a major sponsor of the Wire Schools program out in California to run coax through all these secondary schools so they could cruise the net and see that spreading across the country.
I would like to thank you very much for coming to speak with us today. I'd like to give you a certificate of appreciation and a National Press Club mug. And I would like to ask you one last question. Are you going to set up a network of support for the U.S. Postal Service so they can jump online? What will happen to the Postal Service, or snail mail as we have known it?
We actually have a major project going with the U.S. Postal Service. They're a great customer of ours. And now in several kiosks around the country, you can go in and use the navigator to find or change your address, which is a huge cost to the post office. Address changes, you can do that online through the Netscape navigator. You can find various services of the U.S. Postal Service. But the fact is, eventually, the post office certainly needs, you know, to do something. And this year, for the first time in history, electronic mail passed paper mail in terms of quantity, which is an amazing thing. Now, when I was at FedEx, the U.S. Post Office for years had been decreasing in its percentage of partial post business, and now UPS carries most of the parcel post and has for years in the United States, therefore relegating the post office to third-class kind of operations. And I think we need to be helpful and supportive in figuring it out. I mean, people can talk all they want about the post office. I don't know a person in this room or anywhere that'd like to be in charge of running the post office. I mean, that is a serious business challenge. And we all in business are very dependent on the post office for delivery of invoices and other things that you find it hard to do in alternate ways. So I don't know, but I think they do need to become more obviously automated and certainly more electronic in distribution of products and sponsoring things. They're doing several things, too short a time to mention here, on the certification projects and communications projects, and they would love to get in the front of this parade. And who knows, maybe we'll find new ways to help them. But we certainly recognize the problem they have at hand. And
can you tell us your web address? Not yours, your company's.
My web address is jimb@netscape.com. That'll get to me, and I'll send it to whoever needs it. jimb, one word, netscape.com.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Mr. Barksdale and all of you for coming today, and our staff as well, Melissa Bender and Chad Taylor and Melanie Abdu-Dermont and Howard Rothman for organizing today's luncheon, and good day.
Thank you. That's a great introduction. You worked on that, or somebody did.
I didn't do it. I need a non-date. She did it at the very last moment. I had to edit out the part about Jerry Garcia.
Oh, yes, thank you. My son would kill me someday for that quote, you know. I don't know where he's at. Thank you.